Welcome to the Better Two podcast. I'm your host, Donna. Today's guest is Julie Brill. Julie wrote a book called Hidden in Plain Sight, and it's a story about her father and his life growing up when, well, he shouldn't really exist. We talk about that and a little bit about what's going on in the world that coincides with that, and so much more. So tune in. Hi, Julie. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. So let's talk about right now. Where are you located at? Because I mean, I see you all
Um,
bundled up, and I know
it's
we had a
cold.
little snow here, but not much.
Yeah, I'm outside of Boston. I think it's like 10 degrees. It's actually warmer than it has been, but not warm.
But have you noticed that the winter is a little bit different than? I mean, we used to get tons of snow, and it's like I think we had a smattering of snow. The most we've had is like 3 inches, and I know south of us they had a lot more. But it's
Yeah,
just
Atlanta has snow today. We're bare ground. I cross country ski every chance I get. I have not been out this year. There's just been not enough snow.
when I was in Boston back in 2001, 2000. Yeah, it was. Well, no, yeah, it was around 2001. There was a lot of snow because I went in December and I was there for a week. And yeah, it was snow all over the place. And I've noticed that, yeah, over the last 20 years, it's just like it's lessened and lessened and lessened.
I like the snow, so I'm still hoping we're gonna get more
It's
winter.
it's pretty and the truth is we need it. But we didn't come here to talk about the weather. I just figured, it'd be a nice icebreaker because,
Yeah.
you know. So you have a story that is from your grandfather's perspective, and it's kind of timely because of all the things that are going on in the world. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the book that you wrote and his story?
Yeah, thank you. So my book is called Hidden in Plain Sight. It's a family memoir and also the untold story of the Holocaust in Serbia. And it started, I mean, I feel like I've been writing it my whole life, but I really started writing it in 2017, trying to figure out my family story and how it fit into the greater story of the Holocaust in Serbia and just Jewish history in Serbia, which I, like most people, knew nothing about. I had some stories from my father's early childhood. He was born in 1938 in Belgrade, what was Yugoslavia. So he remembers the war and he would tell me these stories. And I would try to fit them into what I knew about the Holocaust. We learned about Anne Frank and, of course, what was happening in Germany and Poland. And this story was so different, I could never understand it. And finally, in 2017, my kids were grown. I had the, empty nest and the time and the internet, and I started to research and try to fit my family story into the bigger story, and it became a book. Yeah,
And that's the thing. I mean, when we think of the Holocaust, like you said, we think of Germany. We
right.
think of the biggest atrocity that was around. We don't look at the possibility of other atrocities occurring as they took over land and they decimated
Exactly.
people.
Yes, I mean, we learned about Auschwitz. I mean, Auschwitz is, I mean, it's a horrific place. I mean, a
Yes.
million people more died there. Most Jews died outside of camps, and that's the story that people don't know. The paradox is there were tens of thousands of survivors from Auschwitz because it was such a great, large place, and because it was also work camps. And so there were people to tell the stories and their descendants to tell the stories. And where my family was from in Serbia, there were just so few survivors and descendants. Story just hasn't really gotten out.
Well, I'm glad that you're finally stepping up and sharing the story. And the thing is, when you look at today and unfortunately the misinformation that we have out there, people are denying the Holocaust now. And it's like I remember learning about that when I was in high school and thinking, how could we ever get there?
Right.
And yet I'm sitting here seeing us moving forward to a very similar situation, and I'm kind of taken aback by that.
I think it's very scary. And, sadly, as we have fewer and fewer survivors and witnesses to really, say what was there, I think there could be even more Holocaust denial.
Yeah. And I don't understand how well, yeah, I do understand because we've taken critical thinking out of the school system. Once you've taken
Yeah.
critical thinking out of the school system, then people are relying on news that is not real.
Right. Right. And you need the historical perspective to understand what's happening now in the world.
Exactly. And I think we're so caught up in today that we lose, once you don't remember history, you're doomed to repeat it.
Exactly.
And that's what's scary. And it's like when we look at when we look at the information sources that we have now, yes, before it was very narrow and very limited, and now we have information from anybody and everybody. And those stories may or may not be true. But we're going
Right,
to take them and we're going to say, yes, this is true. This is the
right,
way it happened. But when you have generational stories from family that is passed down, and while, yes, the game of telephone can change things a little bit, but if you actually take the time to do research, that's where the gift is. If you start looking at the old newspaper clippings and the old stories, then you can actually see that, yes, there's evidence of that and
right,
proof.
right. Yeah, and part of what amazed me, my father was born in 1938, so he was 3 years old in 1941 when the Germans came in. Everything he remembered with these very childlike memories were true and fit into the historical record. I mean, that was really one of the phenomenal parts for me about, oh yeah, these things that I could never understand that never made sense. Yes, this is why. And that's what I tried to explain in the memoir.
And I think that's the thing. We don't look at kids' memories as really being honest, but honest, but factual and honesty, kids remember more things than we actually know
Right,
because they're imprinted on us, especially if we're very, really, really young.
right, exactly.
So as you look at the big picture of you going into your ancestor, I mean, I did have somebody's work on my genealogy a little bit, and I found out that, because things were always spotty, like my father's mother. She never really talked about her mother. I never really remember hearing about my grandmother. I remember hearing about how bad my great grandfather was, but I never really heard about how my great grandmother was, except for the step grandmother. And so my friend started digging into the genealogy, and it was very interesting to find out that she was from France and that she had died from the flu outbreak in 1917.
Oh,
Uh,
sure.
And so
Yeah.
my grandmother was only 3 when she died. And so once I knew that piece, you kind of go, you look at the person a little differently and go, okay, so some of the behavior patterns, some of these things start to make sense. And I'm sure once again, besides knowing that what your dad was saying was true stories, it gave you an opportunity to look at how his behaviors were.
Exactly. I mean, it made me understand my father so much better, and of course me too, right? I mean,
Mhm.
like it's all this trauma, but also pride and joy that had been handed down, and I knew now where it came from. Um, that was really what was driving me. I mean, it makes me sad for your grandmother. I mean, did she remember her mother at all? Was there anything there?
She never talked about
Yeah,
her. She talked about, and I'll be blunt, how much of a bastard her dad was,
yeah,
and how much her stepmother was basically, they treated her like, to put it in a non-PC way, but stereotypical. She was Cinderella. They made
yeah.
her do all these things. And when she had gotten married early, and she had came home because the guy was a drunkard, and her dad decided, because she was pregnant, push her down the stairs so she could try to
Oh,
miscarry the baby. So that should
yeah.
tell you that besides the losing of the mother, besides all that other trauma, then you have this.
Right.
And
Brutal.
I can't imagine having a person like that. But it made sense as to who she was because as much as I love my mama, she was someone who liked to she would sit there and have you in a room with and say, "Oh, well, your cousin's doing this and your cousin's doing that
Yeah.
and your cousin's doing this." And I never really put it together, but then I would put my other cousin and I, we would start talking and she's like, "Oh yeah, grandma was raising raving about you, about how
Yeah.
wonderful you are." And it
Yeah.
was interesting because her father was abusive, but yet if she stayed with any of us, because she stayed with me after Katrina and she had stayed with my aunt prior to that, which is her blood, and then she stayed with my dad, she always said that either the men needed her to do things or that she took the side of the man. The woman, even her own blood, did not matter. The man was always raised and exalted, but the
Yeah.
woman was not. And it was always
Yeah.
like, because she had even not even met my mother-in-law. She had not even met my mother-in-law, and she was living with us. And she's like, "Your mother-in-law doesn't want to come to the wedding." My mother-in-law had a major heart attack the day of the wedding and still went to
Oh,
our wedding.
yeah.
But it was just weird to see how she liked to play these games.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
And the insight into maybe where it came from a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because she, and I know I'm airing so much of my story, but uh she didn't even go to my parents' wedding. So when she started this stuff about my wedding, I'm like, oh, I see where this is coming from. It's not anything personal. It's you with your stuff in your head that you have to do this.
Right.
So I think that she was scrappy. And as my husband said the first time he met her, he's like, she's a pistol.
Yeah.
And I
She was a
understand more.
survivor in a sense.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think that's one thing that we don't talk about, especially with generational trauma, is we get into these fight or flight modes in our family that we have to always embrace that trauma. We can't get away from it. If something's too good to be true, then it's going to fall apart. And so we kind of start living our life where is everything going to fall apart? Is everything
Right.
and I mean, I'm sure for your father, it's like I'm sure he spent a good bit of his life worried that things were just going to be terrifying at a certain point, that it wasn't going to last. The goodness wasn't going to last.
I mean, my father's story, I think, is interesting. He had this trauma, early trauma of the Holocaust and the war, and then the years after the war, which, he said were hungrier years in Belgrade, than even the war had been. And then they went to Israel in 48 when Israel had nothing. He was breeding rabbits for food in the backyard. And somehow his mother, I never got to meet my grandmother, but his mother protected him, like gave him this feeling of security. I mean, it's an amazing gift for a young child. So he's alive and well at 86. He's carried that feeling, I think, along with him. We're talking about childhood trauma and your grandmother, but
Yeah.
also you can give young children really like a safe sense of safety, whether it's real or not.
Well, it's interesting because I'm listening to an audiobook right now, and they're talking about how in America, not so much overseas, but in America, kids are raised not to have a voice.
Yeah,
Children are raised not to have a voice, and what happens is we detach from our emotions. We don't have that safe space because the parents aren't there to listen. So it sounds
right.
like what your grandmother did was instill a safe space for him, a place to still find joy, a place to still find happiness, that I'm here for you, that you have a voice. Now, I don't know that if that's true, but looking at what we do culturally here versus overseas, I don't think that kids are recognized as much here.
I
And
mean,
that's
it's
where the
interesting that you say that.
go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, sure. So one of the very early pictures I have of my father from before the war, he's like 2, and he's sitting on the table, and all the adults are looking at him like he is the centerpiece. He's the pride and joy. And, I think that's sort of the Serbian love for children. I mean, I didn't let my kids just sit on the table, raising them here in
Yeah.
Massachusetts, but like that feeling that like there's nothing more important than this next generation.
And see, that's the thing that shows true love, true family. And as opposed to here, it's like I remember going with my grandmother and my mom to my Aunt Nadine's house, and they're like, okay, go watch TV.
Right.
You got a Barbie, go watch TV. And I'm like, can I have a piece of paper towel so I can make my Barbie another dress? Sure, go ahead.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then, of course, they had The Young and the Restless on, and I come in, much to their being mortified. I think I was maybe 5 because I've heard the story. And they're like, yeah, you come in and say, so, Mom, what's an abortion?
You can learn a lot from the Young and the Restless.
Exactly. And they're like, you're not supposed to know about that. They were mortified, but you're the one that sat me in front of the TV. And this is before we had the Disney Channel and everything. So you're the one that chose that for me.
Right, right.
And it was better for me not to know what was going on than to, at least in their eyes.
Yeah.
So be seen and not heard. And
Yeah,
that's an unfortunate thing because I think that's where a lot of kids lose their self-esteem and I don't want to say self-respect, but they don't have that wherewithal to know that, hey, it's okay for me to speak up.
I agree with you. They've been told that what they have to say isn't important.
I remember being at brunch one day with my husband, and this lady was sitting there. She's an older lady, and there was a younger woman, and then I guess she was about maybe 14, 15-year-old boy. And the younger woman had gotten up, and the older woman looked at the boy and said, so, what do you want to do with your life? And so the kid starts talking and explaining, and she's engaged with him and talking to him in a very positive way, not going, oh, you shouldn't think about doing that. It was very positive. So we were getting ready to leave, and I actually walked over to her and I was like, thank you. She goes, why? I said, because you were listening to him. And that's
Yeah,
a gift.
yeah.
And I think that happens too much that we don't listen to the younger generation. I'm not saying that the younger generation is all love and light. I'm not saying that, but I think if we had, instead of putting up these parameters about, well, the boomers are this and the Gen X is this, and if we all tried to talk and actually learn from each other, instead of trying to be so cool and so hip and get clicks, I think we could actually come together as a country and as a
Yeah,
world.
yeah,
So
yeah, I
that's my
agree.
kumbaya moment for the year.
Yeah.
So you also do something else though that we talked about briefly, and this is something that I don't think a lot of people know about, and my friend is a death doula, but you're actually a doula. So let's talk about that for a bit.
Sure. So I'm not practicing right now, but I did for a long time. A doula is somebody who supports a family going through the process of having a baby and also postpartum. Often will like come to their house and care for them afterwards. Now I'm a lactation consultant, so I'm in a related field, helping
Mhm.
people feed their babies. I think I went into it in part. Like, what is the most joyous, wonderful thing? I was a little naive. I was young, but what is the most joyous, wonderful thing I could be a part of? Like, what is the opposite of death, right?
Right.
I mean, now I know how stressful and difficult that transition is for many families, but that idea of just like being there in that moment of birth, a new life, and I'm going to have my own kumbaya moment, but that feeling of like, the continuation of the world.
And that has to be pretty amazing to see new life come in and to be there at that moment and at that joyful moment.
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah.
But the one thing, and I will mention, is that you touched on briefly is postpartum, and postpartum is something that is only starting to finally be recognized. And that's an unfortunate thing because I think everybody should be able to recognize that in
Yeah,
post.
it's a huge transition in all the ways, physical, emotional, psychological, just the sheer amount of chop wood and carry water labor that a newborn is, all the pieces. And we should have a village that surrounds us, and most of us don't have a village.
No, no, and that's what's kind of scary is that people will sit there and go, well, you should be able to raise a kid. It should be fine. And, you know, and I don't really want to touch on abortion, but I'm going to because everybody's just like, well, everything should be okay. You should be able to do this. A baby is important. It is, but if you don't have the finances and you don't have the means and the help to take care of it, what good is it really to stick your kid somewhere that you're not even going to be raising it because you're working two or three jobs? What does that do to that child?
Yeah, I feel like
And
it's harder and harder. Just everything is more expensive. Everything is just more,
hmm
you
I
know?
mean, I'm pretty sure when you and I were born, I'm not sure how old you are,
I
but
could tell you.
but I mean, it wasn't that expensive. It was not the expense that it is
Right,
now.
right.
And, when you think about a family starting out, you barely have anything. My dad joined the fire department because he knew I was coming.
Yeah,
And, it's like that was okay because he could handle that one job. Granted, he had a second job because that was firemen usually work 24 on, set 48 off. So they usually have a second job. But he knew what he had to do. And you can't do that nowadays
right.
because there's
He
not
could
a,
do that and pay the rent and pay the
yes,
health. There probably just health insurance came along with that, and the
yeah,
groceries and everything worked.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Now you can't. And I mean, that's the thing. Even back in the day before we switched, healthcare suddenly switched, we used to have a decent deductible. We used to have decent healthcare and not everything was denied. Now everything is what it is.
yeah. Yeah,
So,
it's funny because where I work, with fa new families, I always tell them, oh, your insurance might be denied, your claim might be denied, just resubmit it. And only recently, with the death of the executive in New York, I realized, oh, it's actually the strategy. They do that on purpose to everyone. They just deny all the claims on it's like it's worse than you think. It's a plan.
I worked in auto insurance. I worked for commercial as well as personal lines. And, the one thing I was taught I think it was the second day at the insurance company was we give coverage only to take it away.
Yeah,
And that, most people don't realize. And it was before I had actually gotten into insurance that I realized how screwed up things were because somebody had taken a garden boulder, so about that big, hummed it because I was parked on a busy street, hummed it into my window. It ricocheted around my car and then
yeah.
fell on the floor, which I'm glad I wasn't in the car, and then
Okay.
damaged, trashed some other cars. I had like I think $3,000 worth of damage. and I had $1,000 deductible because they're like, well, you want the cheapest amount, right? And I'm like, yeah, I'm in my 20s. I don't make a lot. Sure, I want the cheapest amount. Now I have to come up with $1,000 and I have no rental coverage because I thought I had full coverage. So there's all these little minute pieces that we don't think about.
Right.
And
We
so
learn the hard way.
then when I was on the other end of it, it's like, well, you have this deductible, and yes, I would get screamed at, and it's like, you picked it, and I understand now. And that's the way I've always looked at life, is because there's always been something in my life to teach me the other side. Maybe that's because I'm a Libra, I don't know, but like I had a stepfather who was not the greatest, and when I became a step parent, I knew what not to do.
Right.
So I think if we look at life, that's the other thing. If we look at the lessons life teaches us, usually they come back into play later on. But
Yeah.
I don't think most people look at that.
Yeah. Yeah. You keep getting the lesson until you learn it.
Hmm. So, how do you plan on writing another book?
No. I think is the answer right now. Maybe. I don't know. Is the more generous answer. I don't have something else in the pipeline. Wrote a book 10 years ago, and then it took me almost 10 years to write this book. And my heart and soul is in it. I'm going to be promoting it. I don't necessarily have plans to write another one.
But sometimes that's all, as long as you've told your story and you're satisfied with it, you don't have to go back to doing, let me go create another book. If you still
Right.
have something more to say, then it's time to write more and do
Exactly.
more.
So maybe, I mean, maybe something else will come. Right now, I'm really focused on this book. It's coming out in April, and it's like a full-time job on top of my full-time job.
So, when you were talking about what you're doing in your full-time job, is it something that's very problematic as lactation coaching? Because I mean, is it something that you're finding more that is a growing problem that newborns aren't wanting to latch on, that they're not, that mothers aren't able to do what they need to do like they should be able to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, my view is skewed because people call me when it's not working, right? I mean, so I like to think, oh, there are lots of babies out there and it's perfect. They don't have a need for me. But what I see day after day is, ill health and dysfunction, and it's really hard. I mean, we feel like this is a basic thing that we expect babies to be able to do, and we're seeing more and more babies that struggle and need support for lots of reasons. It's very complicated, but we always used to think that, like, oh, if you have the ability to birth a baby, the milk will come, it'll all work out, and that's not people who are calling me.
No.
So it's hard.
Well, and it's good that they have a resource such as yourself, because if they didn't, then what are they going to do? And I'm sure
Right.
there's some kind of head games, as you were saying, about, well, I had the baby. I should be able to produce milk. The baby should be able to latch on. The baby, maybe I'm not a good mother. I mean, there's got to be some massive head games when this isn't the quote unquote normal.
Yeah, people can spiral, and I think, there is lactation support and people should reach out. I think there are people who can't or don't and are, struggling on their own. So it's hard.
Um, so where do you see yourself going if you're not writing a book? What do you do in your free time?
What is that? We were saying before the recording started, I like some snow so I could cross country ski. I have a dog. I walk every day. We go to the beach. This book has been my free time for a long time. And now the marketing of it and kind of birthing it into the world is most of my free time, honestly.
Well, that's the thing nobody talks about. Okay, I wrote the book. Everything's good. Yes. Oh no,
Yeah,
wait,
that's
there's a
just the
whole
beginning.
business. Yeah. There's a whole
Right.
business. So
Yeah,
what,
yeah,
go ahead.
sorry, go
No, go
ahead.
ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say the good thing is, working in lactation, working as a doula, we do marketing all the time because our families graduate and don't need us. And so I have that marketing piece, like, do something for your business every day. I'm just following that model now with my memoir.
What kind of pup do you have?
She's a golden retriever.
Okay. I had a
Yeah.
golden retriever once, and she was a doll. She
Yeah.
was we had a cat that was outside, and we didn't know she was pregnant. I know, how do you not know a cat is pregnant? But sometimes you
Huh.
don't.
Yeah.
And it was her first litter, and it had been raining and cold, and the dog, because we had gone off and it started raining. When we got home, the dog had taken the kitten. He took one kitten, the other two kittens had passed, dug a hole, and laid around the kitten until we found it.
Oh, to keep it warm?
Hmm.
Yeah.
and the mother did not want anything to do with it because it was a
Yeah,
new. But I was just like, how amazing is that another species?
that is an amazing story. That oxytocin kicks in and they do
Hmm.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, she was like, it was her baby, and it was all okay. So, as far as going to the beach, do you just run along the beach, or do you go sit out on the beach and
I
enjoy
like
the
to
sand?
walk on the beach. I like to move. Yeah.
Yeah, I went out to Venice, wow, years ago, 2003. And yeah, the one thing I wanted to do was walk in the sand.
Yeah, that's
Because,
what you don't have in Chicago.
well,
Well, you have the
actually,
lake. You have the lake. I take it
we do
back.
have some beaches, and where I used to live at, there was a beach that was about 10 miles from my house. It was off of Lake Geneva. And I know there's a beach somewhere around here. I haven't found it, but I grew up in New Orleans, and an hour and a half away is Mississippi, the
Yeah.
Gulf Coast.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we used to go out to the Gulf Coast all the time.
Yeah.
So now, whether that's going to be the Gulf of Mexico or the Gulf,
I did hear that. Yeah.
uh, but you know, I guess my question for you, having the background that you've had, um, does the next 4 years scare you?
Oh, very much so. Yeah, I wrote the book starting in 2017 under a Trump presidency. And there's explaining in the book of things that are happening under the Trump presidency because I couldn't imagine that when people would be reading the book, we would be in another Trump presidency. I didn't, it was like a lack of imagination on my part. I thought even if he was reelected, we'd be done with him by now. And it's very scary. I mean, I think he's not the whole problem, but he ignites hate everywhere he goes.
And I think that's ego. I mean, I hate to say it, I think it's ego driven a lot of the times. I'm not sure it. I think he says things just to get a rise out of people. The great skit on Saturday Night Live was Drunk Uncle. He is Drunk Uncle come to life.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't seen that, but now I want to.
It's they usually would do it on like the news. It was several seasons ago, and it's basically like your drunk uncle comes to Thanksgiving and or Christmas, and of course, drunk uncle says all the inappropriate things that just make you groan, and you're just they're all untrue. They're all way off base, and you're just
Yeah.
hmm.
Yeah. And there's like a numbness. Like at first you're shocked, but then something else happens and it's not shock anymore.
No, now there is a collective fear, I think, of what is going to happen because it's like the old adage of they came for, and it's like, okay, so you're going to come for the immigrants, okay, and then you're going to come for the women, and we know how this is going to play out. It may not be as horrific, but there's still going to be something along the lines. I just recently talked to a gentleman who is trans, and he's terrified. He's a trans ally, and he is terrified of what this may bring.
Yeah, I think we just don't know. And you can have all of your horrible thoughts and they probably won't all happen, but some of them might. Some of them didn't last time. I think it's
Yeah.
very scary.
Well, and the one thing, so if we talk about the immigrants, it's like, okay, so yes, at the time we're taping this, it is right during the fires are not totally contained, but the fires out in Los Angeles. Okay, so let's be honest here. Who's gonna build that? Who's gonna rebuild that? Who
Right.
is gonna go in there and rebuild? And I remember during the first presidency, my friend who lives in Florida said farming was down. There was problems with farming. There was problems with construction because there weren't the people there to take care of the stuff. And so now you have a whole place that's been decimated. How are you going to rebuild that? And the bigger picture is how are food sources going to be? Was any of the food sources damaged as well? So there's a much bigger picture that we really need to start paying attention to than just this let's go, invade Greenland.
Yeah, it's
I
very
mean,
scary.
yeah. And it does really make you wonder all the stories you heard about Mein Kampf being by the bedside with what he's spouting now about wanting to take over places. Is he really just that reincarnate?
I mean, I've thought about what you're saying. Like when I said he's the problem, he's not the whole problem. It's like he's the spark, right? He's the match, and there's all of this, it's a dog whistle. There's all of this hatred that sort of we weren't, it was there, but we weren't seeing it, and now again we'll see it.
And I don't understand that. And it's like you have to wonder if you look through our history here, was it because when they were so incensed because Obama got elected? and then here we are. And it's like he I don't know. And I don't want to make this a political thing, but in a way what your family went through was somewhat similar because somebody came to power because they were populous and then what did they do?
Yeah. I mean, I've thought a lot about why tell the story, why tell the story now. I don't think there's necessarily a value into, I mean, if you enjoy history, there's a value in history, but I don't think that's where the true value is. I think we learn about history because it matters now. So I've thought about a lot about why we're telling this Holocaust stories
Hmm.
now, and I work with kids. I volunteer in middle school and high school classrooms. Like, why are we telling them the story, and what is the takeaway? And it's got to be, never again. And
Hmm.
that's not just for Jews, it's for everybody. Obviously, it has happened again. There have been genocides since the Holocaust, but if we don't talk about it, how can we possibly hope to prevent it?
Well, and the interesting thing about our own history is the fact that things that we never learned about, like the Oklahoma bombing back in the 50s, or how Central Park wasn't what we thought it is. We never heard those stories, but as they say, history is told by the people who won. So
Right.
we cover up things.
I think about that a lot, and I think about how important the history of individual people are. Like what I learned in school was like kings and generals and presidents, and that's fine. But really, what's interesting is like an individual person on the ground living through a historical event.
Yeah. I
Yeah, I mean
mean,
that's
go ahead.
I'm sorry. I feel like there's a little delay
No,
and I
go
keep
ahead.
talking top of you. That's really what my family story is. It's just my family isn't unusual. It's more that they're typical, surviving in this and not surviving. I think you alluded to before. My grandfather was murdered by Germans, but like their experiences through the war were very typical.
Well, and the thing is, I think because we only learn these big stories like Anne Frank and things that grab your attention, we lose some of humanity when we don't know these other stories about
Right,
how this isn't Auschwitz. This is a story that's different. This is a story that they were still committing atrocities and it wasn't glorified. You don't know these things. It's kind of like when they talk about we're going to make America great again. Okay. We're going to go back to the 50s. What was so great about the 50s?
right, right.
Really?
Well, if
What
you were a
was
straight white man with a good job and a wife, it probably wasn't bad.
No, as
I mean,
long
it's
as
good for some people.
the wife
Yeah,
was subservient and yeah,
yeah.
I mean,
Had dinner on the table. I mean,
mhm.
yeah,
I mean that's and the kids said yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir, no
yeah,
sir.
yeah,
And it's all about obedience. And that's the thing. It's like it's not about making anybody great. It's about obedience. Because
yeah,
if you wanted to take it back to that, you'd raise the taxes on the rich, and
right,
you're not.
right. I mean,
But
people were surviving on that one salary, right? You didn't
mhm,
need everybody to go to work, and for a lot of families.
right. But we also didn't have credit cards per se. We had layaway. We didn't have the instant gratification that we do now in the society. I love technology. I love the fact that I get to do this. But
Yeah,
then there are so many drawbacks that we could survive because you didn't have the subscription. Your TV came in for free. Your phone was one bill. You didn't have four lines. I mean, so it's like I can see how bills have grown to proportion. But if other things haven't changed, then
yeah,
so when you look at the bigger picture, that's the other thing. It's like what what false flags were done by certain people over there and what false flag things are being done by certain people here. I mean, the distraction of the bombing at the hotel, at the Trump hotel.
yeah.
That was a distraction, obviously, to get us all talking. He was a supporter of him. So what was the mixed message there? Because you're bombing in front of the hotel in a Tesla. I,
I don't know. That was very confusing. Yeah,
I mean, messaging is important. I mean, I hate to say it that way, but
yeah, yeah.
so Um, what else should we talk about? Normally, I
Um,
mean, I just
yeah. I mean, I would love to talk more about the book. I'd love to talk more
come
about the
on.
story. Can I tell you about the
Yes.
cover? I'm going to hold up the
Yes.
cover.
You get to tell me anything you want about the
Okay,
book.
so let me pull it up here. This is the cover to the book.
Nice.
Yes, thank you. It's my father and my aunt on the in the picture. When I was growing up, I had a few pictures of my father's childhood. This was one of them. And I would look at it, I was always trying to understand. So that picture, my aunt dates it. So it's 1943. It's like the spring of 1943. The occupation in Germany started in the spring of 1941. So they're 2 years into the occupation, which I understood even as a kid that, it was the middle of the war. And Belgrade was one of the first cities to be declared Judenfrei, which is free of Jews. And that was in the spring of 1942. So this is like a year later. And there are my father and my aunt, two young Jewish children, standing on the street. And so that's where the title comes from. Why is it called Hidden in Plain Sight? Because that's what they're doing. They are clearly in plain sight and they're not supposed to exist. And they're somehow able to do it. And that's what led me to try to unravel the mystery and write the book. And now I understand it was illegal for citizens in occupied Europe to own cameras and to take pictures outside because you could take a military picture, you could give away something. So the picture is even more of a mystery. And in that picture, there are clues to how they did survive, which I explain in the book. So, um, just kind of a little teaser.
But I was going to say, what's interesting is that picture inspired so much for you that it opened up doors and made you sit down and unravel this. And that's the thing I don't think people realize that one photograph can open up so many things to your past.
Exactly. I spent so much time looking at these pictures. There was one picture of my grandfather with my father, one picture of my grandmother with my father, and then my grandparents' wedding photo and this picture. And I just looked at them and like, where are the clues? Who are these people? What were they thinking? And you look at, the wedding picture, my grandparents got married in 1935. You want to like yell at the picture, right? Like they have no idea what none of us know what the future is, right? But they have no idea of this like horrible future that's so close that's coming. And then as an adult thinking about it, I would realize like even if they knew, what would they do? Like
Right.
what would they have done? I mean, no one could imagine what was coming. At some point before the invasion, my grandfather started to get really worried that the Germans would invade, and he tried to buy basically a false ID, false papers, so that he could go somewhere and hide. And they didn't do it for my grandmother and my father. They like didn't have the capacity to imagine that women and children could be in danger. Like it had happened before that Jews were persecuted, but not like this. They just couldn't grasp what was happening, what would happen.
Right.
So, and it happened so early. I mean, April 1941, the US isn't even in the war till December with Pearl Harbor. So, before the gas chambers, before the Holocaust really got going, the Jews in Serbia are mostly murdered, so fast and so early.
And
So it is a different story.
that's when I look back at this, it's like, what do you gain by doing this? We're all human. We are all human. And that's why I don't understand the hate today. It's like we're all human. It shouldn't matter who you love. It shouldn't matter the color of your skin. I mean, I have friends that are white passing, and but I mean, if you somebody found out, oh my gosh, that could be cause so much trouble for them, and
Yeah,
that's
still in
ridiculous.
2025.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's where we are.
and
Yeah.
it's like I remember in the '80s thinking, wow, we have progressed. We're moving. Things are opening up. We're moving along.
It's the
Yeah.
future.
But then when
Yeah.
my mom died in '91, and I mean I was in Louisiana at the time, Louisiana and Dallas, or in Texas, and we went to go get my mom's ashes. And so we're driving through Indiana. It's like 2 in the morning, and they're like, "Okay, folks, we're gonna have our local KKK rally,"
Oh my God.
and they gave the date and the time, and I'm just like,
Was that on the news?
it was on the radio, and I was just mortified because I'm like,
Yeah.
I grew up in Louisiana. I don't. We didn't. They didn't openly have that stuff. I mean, yeah, sure. I know I know David Duke and all that stuff. Louisiana. I understand all that. I do. But I never openly heard it on the radio, and this was on the radio, and I was just like,
Yeah,
it
that's
jarred
horrifying.
me. Yeah. But it hasn't gotten better. It's I certain time when I still see the certain presidential signs in the people's yard, the first thing I think to myself is, well, thank you for letting me know you're a racist.
Yeah. I don't think anyone in this election could have any illusions about what they were voting for. So maybe the
Mm.
first time, but now we all have seen it.
And that's what I don't understand is he lied the first time, so why are you buying now? Why are you still buying the swampland?
Yeah.
So what else can you tell me about the book?
Yeah. So I wrote about it, a little bit about my childhood, a little bit about my father's childhood, and then it's the journey of discovering how my father survived, how his family survived. And we went to Belgrade to find out. So I took 3 trips with my dad and my daughters, and that was just amazing. I mean, I went back to my father's hometown. I didn't realize how much he was Serbian, and we are Serbian. At one point, we were with a guide, and the guide's car broke down, and my dad just said, get out. And we walked back to the hotel and we had gone on this circuitous route and he just made a beeline. Like he just knew where he was because he had walked those streets, 75 years before. It's phenomenal. We met family we didn't know existed. We discovered all kinds of things about our story. As it was happening, I was like, oh, this has to be a book. I want to take the reader along with me on this journey of discovery because I think, regardless of what your family story is, we all have these. Our families all live through history. We all have these family stories, and we can discover them. So interview your older relatives and do the research. I really felt like I was at this Goldilocks moment where my father was still able to tell me the stories and we were able to kind of probe his memory and find new things. And at the same time, the internet, they have constantly just opened archives. There's more and more documentation available. So all the things that I could discover.
I did that with my grandmothers. I sat down with both of them with a camcorder and I sat down and asked them questions about their lives and
So
let them tell
important.
me. My dad, I never did.
Yeah.
And he's always been very closed off. He would tell occasionally his fireman stories, but he's never really talked about things. So,
Yeah. And I think everybody's family has that. I know certainly with Holocaust survivors, there are the people who never talked about it. There were, people who had kids and the kids didn't know. My dad was sort of on the opposite side, where if you asked him a question, he would always answer it. But he was so young that his memories weren't, the full memories of an older person. I just think memory is fascinating. You can remember things that you hadn't remembered before. Some of the things that came out for my dad were standing in places in Belgrade where he had been as a child and there was a new memory there. Or somebody else would ask him and he would tell the story in a different way. And I would be like, I didn't know that. I've heard this story so many times, So some of that, like interviewing, but re-interviewing, like asking again, asking, for
mhm,
details. And as we age, and I'm like asking from an older and older person's perspective, well, how did your mother feel about that? And what do you think she
right.
was thinking? And all of that.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
your perspective from being a 20-year-old or a teenager to being in your 30s and 40s and 50s, when you want to look at your parents, you're going to look at them totally different.
right, right. You
Totally
start to look at
different.
your parents and they're in your memory younger than you are now. And, it's
Hmm.
humbling.
It's very humbling. Um, have you said he's still alive, correct?
Yep.
So what does
Yeah.
he think about the book?
I think he's into it. He didn't, it's not a book he asked for. I've met some writers who are the children of survivors and their parents have said, you have to tell my story and it's like such a burden. That wasn't my father at all. But he was always willing to help me tell the story. And I think he's pleased to have it out in the world. And along the way, we found family that he didn't know, and maybe that was the real gift. The family that he didn't know, and the stories that he didn't know that he would have known if it hadn't been for history. If he had his parents to be able to tell him if he'd been living in the context of his Jewish neighborhood.
But it's also a gift for you because you get to spend this time with him and learn these things with him. And
Yeah,
not everybody has that relationship with their father, trust me.
I feel like it brought us closer together. I mean, it's just, it was kind of this role reversal. You expect your parents to pass stories down to you, and my father did that. Both my parents did that. But also, I was discovering these stories through research and passing them up to him. And that was really a phenomenal thing.
Nice. That's very
Yeah.
nice. So is there anything that we didn't talk about that you wanted to mention?
The book comes out on April 23rd. And it's available for pre-order now. My website is just my name, juliebrill.com. All the links for all the places you can buy it, the big ones, of course. But Bookshop is on there, and you can order it from your local bookstore. You can order it for your library. It's great when people do that too. And I have some related articles on the website and some videos, so if people want to check that out. Yeah,
And that all will be in the show notes as well. So I thank you for coming on,
awesome.
Julie.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun. I just enjoyed our conversation.
I can only imagine for Julie what it was like to stand there with her father and have him retell tales of his own experiences. And it's pretty amazing that he knew the roads and where to go and how to maneuver, and he hadn't been there in 75 years. I mean, it's amazing how we have, I dare I say, muscle memory, or those memories from being a kid that we know exactly where things should be. Now, granted, sometimes things change, things are destroyed, things don't last. But sometimes the roads are exactly where they used to be. When I was growing up in New Orleans, there's a place called Algiers Point, and it's part of Algiers, but it's kind of this little niche right at the corner, right at the peninsula of Algiers, and it's where the ferry is. And right by where the ferry is, at least when I was growing up, there was still the brick roads from back in horse drawn buggy days. There was still the brick pavement there. Everywhere else around it was real road, was blacktop road or concrete road. But right there was still the bricks. And so it was like preserving history. They redid the ferry, so it was a modernized ferry, but there was still the road there. And it always amazed me that that was still intact. And most of Algiers is still some of those homes. And I watched some of those homes when I was a kid be taken down to the studs, the shotgun homes, and then rebuilt. And it was always amazing to see that happen, how somebody had still taken the history of certain pieces, because there's certain architecture things that they had to preserve, but they still made it and rebuilt it. And if you looked at the inside of these homes, they were gorgeous now. They still were the shotgun type house, but they had cared for it and redid the house. And these houses sometimes were from the 17, 1800s. So I think if we look at history, and that was something that we were trying to touch on, if we look at history, not just the big history that we learn in school, but if we take the time to learn about history, we can see how it repeats and how it brings up things again. And currently, I am listening to a book, and it's talking about how us being so emotionally unattached leads us to fall for these people that are the populists, the people that tell us what we think we need to hear because we're unattached, we're almost on autopilot, and we want to hear what they have to say because it's going to save us all. But the truth is, they have an agenda, and we are buying into this agenda because we don't really want to be in touch with our emotions. I'm not sure if you can hear the dog snoring or not, but that's Charlie, and yeah, he likes to snore sometimes, or he can't help it. But I think we have to be emotionally available and emotionally aware and have empathy for our fellow man. We can't dislike people for what they do, the color of their skin, because of who they love. Why do we have to dislike somebody? That nobody is perfect, and we have to really all come together. We have to support each other. If you look at what's going on, and yes, I mentioned that I'm taping this during the California wildfires, you look at how people are coming together out there to rally for each other, to lift each other up, to protect each other, to give what they can to help out. And that's where we need to be. We need to have compassion. We need to have love for other people because a child should not have to go through war. A child should not have to go through these traumas. And a child should have to have a voice. And that apparently is what her father's mother did. Her grandmother gave her son a voice. And he was able to keep those stories and remember those stories and still have a positive life. When we don't allow ourselves to express how we feel with the trauma, that's where the problems start. And we really need to be able to express our voice and to listen to truth and not buy into somebody else's agenda. We need to be there for others as well as ourselves and learn that it's okay to feel. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be happy. And nobody is perfect. And if things aren't working, like we were talking about with the lactation coaching, if your body's not doing what you think it should be doing because everybody else's body did it, don't get down on yourself. You know, it's like everybody is taught we need to be skinny, but the truth is, as we age, we do gain weight. It happens. And so we have to start accepting who we are, loving ourselves for who we are, and loving the people around us. Even if we can't stand their politics, and even if we don't like certain things, we have to understand that we're all different and that we're not all cookie cutters. And I don't want to go back to 1952, the quintessential perfect life. Because you know what? The place I grew up in, even with all its problems, was pretty great. And it could still be great if we get rid of the hate. And that's a lesson that's been trying to be learned over and over and over again. And we can't let somebody come in and say it's somebody else's fault because blame can be very toxic. It's just like shame. And all that needs to be released. I'm not saying to forget because we don't need to forget, but we need to remember that we're all equally loved and we're all equally flawed and we need to get along. So, on that heavy note, I hope you have a wonderful day, evening, weekend, whenever you're listening. And yes, I forgot. I need to thank Rich Tsai from 30 Year Audio Productions for doing the audio and Fast Susie for the intro and outro song. And I thank you guys for tuning in. And I'll catch you next time, guys. Bye.